Morning, everyone, and welcome to this new edition of the Community Live Interview series. I'm excited to have Travis King on the show today. Hey, Trav, how are you?
Doing great, Seb. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, really good, really good. Thanks.
Good.
There's a few people tuning in. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Today, we're going to talk about an exciting topic. We all want to start and grow communities and scale communities, but we all know that scaling community starts by actually building um, unbreakable bonds with a smaller group within your community and turning them into ambassadors and helping this group share with the rest of the community and help yourself grow the community. So excited to talk about that topic. First off, let's just introduce our host today. So Travis, you've been around, you've been places in the community world. You started off with Meetup a few years ago, one of the major community platforms out there, and then you've done some work in community. You've hosted podcasts. You've done many things. So please tell us about yourself and where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Seb. So, hey everyone, I am Travis King. I am a Gemini from Delaware. Like Seb mentioned, I started my community building journey, I'd say like roughly 10 or so years ago, whether I knew it or not. Right. And growing up, I was a football player, triple jumper. At core to me is like a human is someone that always understands like what's going on emotionally. And I feel a lot, especially when it comes to my inner circle. Um, and so like I guess the fun thing about this is that like throughout my career, I've done a lot of marketing, small startups, turned down to sales jobs early on. Found my way into marketing in New York, and yeah, just super excited to kind of like be here and kind of share with what I've learned in the software tech space, what the community world is kind of turning into, and kind of excited to share, one, how to pick up and build unbreakable bonds with everyone personally today, and then two, looking at this in a way that puts people at the forefront, and then kind of like wrap this up with some takeaways.
Cool. That's exciting. We're gonna dive right into the topic today. For the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of audiences online, mostly on social media. Everyone has been chasing followers on LinkedIn, Twitter, Insta, and so on. And what we're observing at Melting Spot is the rise of communities, and there's a big difference between an audience and a community. And we're going to touch on that. Um, Maybe Travis, to help us sort of get more practical with how to create unbreakable bonds with your inner circle. Can you tell us about a community close to your heart that you created lately?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the most interesting communities that I'm a member of right now is our Friday happy hour crew, is what we called it. That's literally the name that we have in our LinkedIn group. And it's a community of sales pros that started like roughly 3 years ago. And it happened because of the pandemic. There were, a few people around, and someone just one Friday was like, "Hey, like let's do a happy hour and let's just talk on a Zoom. Let's just about like how we're doing." And we've met every Friday now for almost 3 years. There's a child that is the age and size of the happy hour, that's now walking, working, saying words like it's a whole grown human. And one of the things that I didn't realize was that like having this place where we talk about work, family, relationships, like we didn't really talk about sales much. If it was like something that like pissed somebody off, or somebody had like a big lesson or a big win, then we kind of share that stuff. We don't really go too deep ever on like sales knowledge, because that's what most people do during the day. And so I think at one point, like it started off where there was like 60, 70 people coming and joining each Friday. And then now it's like whittled down to about 16 or so, 15 core inner tribe members that show up every single week without fail, and probably know where to go get the link. Not really anything formal, just very simple group chat link. Everybody's on the invite, and yeah, it's been super impactful for all of us.
Cool. So obviously we're going to have to translate this into bigger B2B communities, but I think it's a great example, and we're going to dive a little more into how you manage to create bonds with these sales pros. So speaking of how you use the idea is that people in the audience are running B2B communities and mostly marketing communities, so communities of prospects or clients or users of their service. And so obviously they're not on a personal relationship with their community, and yet I think there's key takeaways from what you went through with this community that we can translate into B2B communities. So tell us about how you actually like broke the ice and started building real relationship with guys that you never heard of before.
Yeah, great question. So I'd say there's an interesting dynamic to building these unbreakable bonds, where there's a compounding effect. So I typically break this down into three layers. So there's always going to be some form of of a unique commonality, and when you can kind of find this, you want to find one that like keeps this very general, and just being a member of a group or participating in the same event or being a member of the same profession, just like very very basic top level, something in common. And then once you find out there's something in common, then there's some form of a vulnerable moment or transformational experience that happens when you kind of hear the people around you saying a question, talking about a story, or sharing a big step in their life, or something that they might be embarrassed to share. And it just shows that they trust you. So this takes, some form of courage from the person sharing. And then the third layer is having that moment recognized and reciprocated from another human in the group, in a similar behavior, maybe not the same exact story situation, but they're sharing something equally as close to them with everybody around them. And then eventually everybody starts to kind of share things that they might not have felt comfortable of sharing about their family, about work, about finances, about mental health, just anything that they're struggling with. And then there becomes like this, I'd say, like this invisible field around the community where everybody knows they can show up without being judged, and it's a safe space for them to do so. And then it just kind of just happens, consistently after that.
Cool. I like the three layer concept, and I think it's certainly relevant in the B2B world. If you really if you really want to bring some horizontal dimension to your community, you need to like steer away from the one way content, webinar type of content or conference type of content where you don't really give room for your audience to share about themselves, and try to favor live moments where people can actually jump in, talk to each other in a more like a workshop mode.
Yep.
And so that that could take the form of a live where you start by telling people, hey, what's on your mind today, what's your key challenge. This might be a way to prompt that vulnerable moment that you just mentioned. Would that be a good idea?
100%. And another one that I use often with a lot of friends, colleagues, is the 1 to 7 scale. So instead of asking people like, "Hey, how are you?" or "Hey, how are you feeling?" get really specific about it and say, on a scale of 1 to 7, how great is your day? It's a positively framed question. And if someone tells you anything below a 5, you can probably dive in with a follow-up question. So if I ask that question, someone tells me that they're a 4.6 out of 7, that's not a 6, or that's not a 5.2. They're below a 5, and I can tell that there's something keeping them down there. So then that'll prompt me to ask a question, which then usually opens up the conversation.
Cool. So where are you at today, Trav?
Whew. Since I knew we were doing this talk, I had a little slip up this morning. So I'd say I'm probably at like a 5.9.
Not bad, not bad. I'll ask the same question at the end of the show.
Yeah, 1,000%. Where are you at?
Well, I'm almost
Don't
through
lie
my
either, just
day.
because you're on here. Don't lie either.
It's 6 p.m. my time, so it's the end of the day. It's been a pretty productive day, so I'd put it, but yeah, same range between 5 and 6.
Okay, that's positive.
Cool. All right. So That's really interesting, and I think that's something that we will look to do more, is trying to let community members actually share about the problems and challenges to create that bond. Um, so now that we know a little bit more about the dynamics behind the, building those unbreakable bonds, I'd like to talk about how you balance these dynamics with scale, because it's easy enough to I mean, so easy enough, so to speak, but easy enough to create bonds with a group of 16, 50, maybe 60 sales pros during the pandemic. How do you replicate this to a larger community, let's say a community of software users of about a couple hundred or maybe 500 people? How do you balance scale with creating unbreakable bonds?
Great question. So, especially when it comes to 16 people, right? Super easy to stay in contact. Everyone can be in one group chat. So, once you get to 160, maybe 1600, maybe 16,000, right? Users, members, like, what do you do? And I think I always like to refer to Dunbar's number. And so, for people that are unfamiliar, I'm sure we can link out to something like this in the past or drop a link to the comment.
Yeah.
But in terms of the number of social relationships that people can manage at one time, 150 is that number, right? And so when I always think about community, I always bring up these, Dunbar number, and then I break things down into, smaller clans, super families, like very small, like 5, 15, 50, 150 person groups, to then be able to think like, okay, how can I start to group or put people together in ways, and specifically in the B2B context, like what topics or things or situations are people consistently going through that they need help with? And one of the biggest, I guess, case studies that I can share, I guess, happened when I was working at Meetup, where there were so many experiences happening across the platform on a daily basis that like one specific type of group, I'm just going to use, actually give me an example of a community on the platform.
Yeah,
Let's just make this
well,
more relevant.
we're currently hosting a huge community of creators.
Okay.
So people like solopreneurs, creators,
Yep.
podcasters, YouTubers, and they come together every day, 12 p.m. our time. So it's now over, but they're coming back together tomorrow. And they hear from other podcasters, other YouTubers, and creators, and talk about how to help them with their creativity. So, and they're a group of 1,000 people every day. So, the discussion space is going ballistic.
Exactly. And then within that space, and this is a great point. So like now there are 1,000 people talking about things. Now topics of conversation are being surfaced within your platform in the chat function. And now I think being able to kind of think like, okay, now if we look back to Dunbar's number, at like what level do these big groups start breaking off? And as the community leader, or like the facilitator in this case, like most of us are, like how do you identify where people are grouping up? Like, and this is, unless you have analytics behind kind of how this is moving, the simplest way is to kind of like see who's engaging with each other on the platform, right? Did Travis engage with Seb's comment about the struggles of solopreneurship as a creator in the B2B, influencer space? Did anyone else engage with that? Oh, these three people engage every single week when they show up at 12 o'clock with each other. And then they also have this separate WhatsApp group chat that is not even on the platform. And that's kind of one of these activities, like I mentioned, that can't really be tracked. That when you start to have people say, like, oh, Trav is a podcaster, an entrepreneur, and a music producer. Like, we should put him with the other guy who's a music guy and an entrepreneur. He's an artist. And they both came together because they're in this community and they like music. And then they also shared that, like, they had this self doubt thing going on. And then they also shared that they had this mental health thing going on. And now, over the span of 3 text messages, they came together over what they did, music. They now shared what they were going through. And then they shared something in a text message that ended up connecting them on a deeper level because they were actually going through mental health struggles at the same time. But they didn't put that in the platform, they just put it in the group chat. Right.
Mm.
So it's like being able to first think, all right, look at my community in buckets of 150. How strong is this tribe? I call that a tribe. So the tribe is 150. Then there's a clan, which is 50. So a tribe is 3 clans of 50. And then there's a super family, which is 15, which is the smaller, which is kind of where my happy hour group lives. Like that's what our like organism size is. And then there's the inner circle, which is the 5. So that's like your like when you're building, that's kind of how the phase goes. 5 go 1, just you. I'm interested in this thing. I care about this thing. To 5, which is your inner circle, and then to your 15, which is a clan, or excuse me, to your super family, which is 15. Sorry for confusing people. To your clan, which is 50, and then to your tribe, which is 150. And then as the community builder, you can kind of look at your community in this way of like, for every 150 people, I should maybe think about having maybe a certain number of leaders that are self governed and power the community. So
Mm.
a lot. Hope that makes sense for people, and I can happily break stuff down.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and actually provides a beautiful transition to the next question I had around the role of the community leader in like fostering and encouraging that the creation of bonds between members. When we had the our prep chat to prep for this interview, I asked you the question around: do you think a community should be managed, or should it by a community leader, or
Mhm.
should it be self-managed? And with what you just said, you kind of think, okay, if someone needs to look after like everyone's interest and who's interacting with what and what topic is trending, that's got to be the role of a community leader. But on the other hand, you told me, well, I like self-managed communities. So where do you sit?
Yeah, so I'm an interesting case, right? And I always joke about this because I, my personal belief, based on what I've experienced and lived, both as like a community builder and just as like a member of multiple communities, the ones that I find that I love the most are the ones where they're community led, meaning there's not a central owner, manager, person from the top that is like, hey, like it's me. But right in this context, since obviously a lot of people listening are in the B2B world, like that's not always the case for them, right? Like for the B2B world, like you're probably in a place where you're managing a community, but like for me and like what I like, I think like I find the success happens most in the community world when you're actually letting and learning what can I do to synthesize everything that's happening, emotions, conversations, interactions, to then make this better for the people that are in here. And if you then think like, okay, like nobody actually wants or needs me to tell them everything that's happening or give them stuff that they don't even want, like they just wanted it easy to like connect with, like you said, the founders or the creators at 12. And then anything to enhance that experience or transformation in the process is what in my eyes, the community leader should add. Um, if that makes
Makes
sense.
Yeah, absolutely makes a lot of sense. Reminds me of a comment that Christina Garnett from HubSpot shared with us a few weeks ago when she was like in your shoes. She was a host on the show. She was a guest on the show, and she said, "Well, growing a community is like hosting a party. You want people to feel the hustle and bustle of the party. You want like a lot of noise, and but when you join the party, you also want to like join a smaller group and interact with people. And as the party host, your role is to make sure that people can group and form like clusters without you having to tell them, hey, you should go there, you should go there. And so if you translate this into community building in the business world, it's down to letting people choose which their areas of interest, choose which topics they want to discuss, and which groups they want to be part of. Correct?
Yep. And make that as frictionless as possible.
Fair enough. Cool. I wanted to take you back to your podcaster days. I know you've been hosting successful podcasts in the last few years, and you're still a podcast host. A podcast by nature is very different to a community. Like you talk out there in the wild and hope that people will listen in. There's little to no interaction between the audience and then the the host and the guest. So, at what point do you decide to take a podcast audience and turn it into a community?
This is such a loaded question. Such a loaded question. And my response to it is I think it honestly depends on every podcaster. However, I will give you some like things to think about if you're in this situation or if you find yourself here. So it always comes down to, is this right for the people? Number one, like, do the people need a community or do they need something to show up to? Because a lot of times, like, I've seen podcasters start and not realize they're starting a community, and that like they get all hung up with, like, I got to build a community now. I have all these audience people, I have all these listeners. Like, I got to give them somewhere to go and something to do. And I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Like, sometimes, like, it's okay to be very, very, like, fine with just being a host of a thing and sharing the information. And you do not need to start a community. That is the honest truth. Now, if you are like, how can I add more value to the listeners of my show? Then it might be, okay, what things can I do outside of my like broadcast podcast to start more conversations? So maybe it's opening it up to not doing just a guest one on one, but to doing a thing where multiple members can come in, show their faces, interact, ask questions, and do an episode that has, 70 people in the audience. And it's a conversation. But I think a lot of times it comes down to like, one, do the people and does your audience need this? And then two, like when you're considering it, it's like, all right, like how do you do this now? Like how do you start a community
Mm.
after you're like, hey, I want to do it now? Well, and I'm always like, hey, first off, if you know a tool and you know how to use it, kudos. Because like that's one of the biggest things that community builders struggle with is like what tools, because that's the number one thing people come to me with.
Yeah,
What tools, what platforms, where should I host this?
yeah,
Always like one of the first questions every time. And you even heard about the infrastructure of my happy hour group, right?
yeah,
The LinkedIn group chat with a calendar invite with a Zoom link.
yeah.
And if anybody doesn't have the invite, guess what? They just go back to the group chat and scroll up and click the Zoom link.
Mm.
And if they invite anybody, they invite them into the group and they say, "Hey, everybody, I brought so and so. I hope that's okay." And we welcome them. They join the group chat if it's interesting. When they come back when they get the link again.
Yeah.
So like,
Well, fair enough. Fair enough
yeah,
for small communities, but if you want like to build a bigger community, you want to start slicing and dicing your audience. You want to start
hundred
offering a
percent.
differentiated experience to people. So, and then your LinkedIn group is falling short, I guess. Victoire in the chat is asking a question around how you take an audience. Like we talked about whether it's relevant to turn a podcast audience to a community. If you decide to do so, how do you do it? That's her question. You
Oh, that's a
simply
great
like
question. That's
go
a
ahead.
great question.
And so just for the sake of context, Victoire is managing a community of finance pros, to sort of put it simple.
Got it. No, it makes a lot of sense. And so like in this case for finance pros, I think like trying to figure out like what do they need? And this is a very basic question that sounds easier coming out of my mouth than it is to actually answer. But like one of the next levels of questions I'd say is like, what's the frequency right now of the conversations? Like, are you talking with the members? And if you are, how can you get them to be a part of the conversation and highlight their thoughts, experiences, stories in a way that either A helps them, level up their careers, right? Are they trying to get promotions? Are they trying to learn something new? Are they trying to do are they trying to learn a tool or trick? What sort of things are you giving them on a daily, weekly, and a monthly basis that are helping them become better finance professionals? If it's training, if it's like workshops, if it's course, like whatever that is, I'd say like one, make sure that you have some sort of frequency and like keep it basic. Is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? That's how I usually like help like community leaders like think about like how to manage up like these sort of engagements. Um, and then yeah, I would just start small. Like I wouldn't even think like I got to make this community. Like start with I got to find one person that wants to talk about something, and that's it. Like start with one of the members that you have and just send them a message in whatever platform you use. Hopefully Melting Spot. And send them a message and say, hey, would love to hear what's on your mind. Like let's, catch up for 10 to 15 minutes about what's going on in your world. That's it.
Cool. I'm glad I didn't have to do my self promotion because that's something we don't want to do on the show. So thanks for doing it for me.
Hey, anytime.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of this show. I'd like to talk about again, like bring the discussion back to the B2B ground. We've talked about sales led strategies, and then we've talked about product led strategies in the last few years, with like great examples of that being Slack, Netflix, Notion. And now we're seeing the rise of community-led strategies where people tend to, like companies tend to even like build up their communities before they actually build their product or service. So does that seem relevant to you? Like what does the community-led growth future hold for you?
Oh, it's huge. It is huge, huge, huge. I think one of the best examples of people doing this community thing in the B2B world that I know is the team over at Refine Labs.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if people listening are familiar, but like Chris has been doing a lot of work, like him and his team on like breaking down what this kind of new evolution of like revenue, go to market, demand generation looks like. And the way that they do all of their events, how they run their community, I think is a great example for any B2B community pro that's trying to figure out like what's the infrastructure, cadence, what does the actual output look like, and like how do you do it in a way that's not spammy, but like gives the community everything they need. And the I guess high level, real quick, 30 seconds, how they do that. It's like they set up a weekly thing that has Chris and his team and all their various industry functions talking about topics that their customers care about. So they always talk about these different things, whether it be culture, leadership, diversity, sales, marketing, demand, whatever the topic is. And then they have um, an invite or a calendar where they send private invite only exclusive access to events that you have to get an email to come to. So not everybody gets access. This isn't a public link that goes out like it's an invite only thing. And so by doing this consistently, this gives them the space for people to come in and ask questions. They have hundreds of people every week. And so for any community leader, it's like gather the topics each week that happen at these events and then just go through them one by one. And if you have a bigger community, say 1,500, 2,000 people, you're going to need more than one person or some sort of tool to get these analytics and insights from. So yeah, that's kind of like the best. I think one of the best examples I can share for everybody listening.
Cool. Thanks a lot. This actually it's a good topic we haven't had much time to touch on, but how do you drive your community activities with data and the importance of having relevant analytics around the events, the discussion topics that you offer in your community, and trying to pinpoint the topics that are trending, the type of live content that is attracting members and viewers, and sort of adapting your strategy to that. We have a question again from Victoire. Thanks, Victoire. Do you think having a face, someone representing the community, makes it easier to gain new members, or can a company build a community as easily, like without necessarily having some sort of ambassador?
Oh, that's a great question. So I guess real quick, we can do it both. You can do both. Short answer is you can do both. The simple answer, or the one that people I guess think, is that you need some sort of face to do it. And like there are examples of brands where like especially in the B2B world, like in this example, like Chris is the person and Refine Labs is the brand. But both like you can see the ethos of the founder Chris in the brand itself, but at the same time, like the brand separately stands for a complete, like it's a company, it's a whole team of humans, whereas Chris is just the individual, right? Like
Mm,
Travis is the individual, whereas like LaunchPoint, my company, is a team of people, right? So I think as long as you're distinguishing what this thing or person stands for your community. So like in your case, like since you, unless you want to be a finance thought leader or you want to go down that lane, you might either need to have an influencer that's a finance professional that you either work with as an ambassador, or like you need to be focusing on like why does our brand matter to finance professionals in your case.
cool. Thanks, Travis. We're short on time, but I have one final question for you. How do you
Oh,
feel now on a scale of 1 to 7?
oh, I'd say you got me up to like a at least a 6.5 because now my brain's thinking in new ways thanks to Victoria and a lot of the stuff that we talked about. So I'm flying high. Where are you at?
Yeah, same. Like you got me to 6.6. I only have like a couple of hours left in my day to make it to 7. You have almost half a day, so lucky you.
I
Thanks
love
for
it. I
being
love it.
here, Travis. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for taking the time. I hope you have a beautiful day out in New York. And let's keep in touch. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Victoire, for all your great questions. And we'll see each other later. We're going to host a few in real life events across Europe in the next few weeks. We have no event scheduled in New York yet, but when that happens, I'll let you know, Trav.
Oh yeah, let me know. I'll happily host, MC, whatever you need. I got it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, and have a good day, everyone.
Thanks
Cheers.
again.
Bye
Cheers.
bye.
Bye.